Earlier in the month, Atari announced that they'd be adding more games to the Atari 50 collection. While the compilation already had a strong lineup of games, there were still some gaps to be filled. But now that the update is here, we know what games have been added. Did they make the right call with the new additions, and should it sway your opinion on whether you pick up this collection? Let's take a look. What's going on? It's Podrez coming at you with another video. Alright, we're going to be talking about Atari 50. We did this once, didn't we? Well, we got more games to look at now. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to my brother. In the past, he's actually been very helpful when it comes to coming up with video topic ideas as well as video title and thumbnail ideas. I actually really appreciate what he's done for me and the channel, and honestly, if it weren't for him, I might not have the audience that I do right now. And if you got a second, definitely check out his eBay channel. With the holidays coming up, it might be great timing. He sells all the above, anything you can imagine. He also sells games. The amount of care that he puts into his listings and just the amount of time he spends on doing this is unbelievable. So yeah, I'm going to put a link in the description to his eBay channel, and yeah, definitely check it out. So if you've seen a couple of my videos and you like what I do, hit that subscribe button right there. It only takes a small second, but it helps our channel grow. Anyway, let's talk about these extra games. Before we discuss the added games, what actually is Atari 50 and is it worth picking up? And later on, we'll talk about whether the added games should sway your opinion about the collection. Atari 50 was an anniversary collection of games that came out last year. Initially, it came with 103 games, and every console by Atari has at least one game included in this collection. Even more obscure consoles like the Lynx and the Jaguar have some representation on here, and that's great. They got the selection of games 95% right, with only a few expected titles missing. A few examples would be Radar Lock on the 2600 and Food Fight on the 7800. The emulation is near perfect. I didn't notice any sound or graphical issues with any of the games. Even paddle games were represented well here despite having to use a Pro Controller. You're also able to customize the game in numerous ways, like adding bezels and scan lines. The lineup of Atari games is also very impressive, with even some of Atari's early titles like Fire Truck being on here. They even went the extra mile by adding unreleased prototypes like Maze Invaders. They didn't just add older games, but Digital Eclipse also added some reimagined games like Sword Quest Airworld. Overall, it's clear that a lot of care went into this collection, and this title is meant for hardcore fans of Atari. So let's talk about the added games. I commend Atari for giving us 12 extra games for free. I feel like most companies would make you pay for the upgrade and call it DLC, so it's really cool that Atari's not doing that. Here's the extra games that Atari added to this collection. As we can see, most of these are 2600 games, and it does fill in a few of the gaps. We're going to talk individually about each one and then discuss if this should change your opinion on whether Atari 50 is worth it or not. Here's Adventure 2. A little backstory with this game, it's a ROM hack of the original adventure that was featured on Atari Flashback 2. Not much to say about it. The first game was great for its time, especially because games like Legend of Zelda didn't exist yet, but I don't think a lot of people are excited that this one's on here, including myself. Now for Bowling. It's a very standard version of bowling that's in a horizontal perspective. There's more gameplay variations you can pick from that give you the option to steer the ball or not. Basically, it's a way to make the game easier or harder. One thing I really like about Atari 50 in general is that you can easily see the gameplay variations on the menu. This is really nice because back in the 80s, you either needed an instruction manual or you had to trial and error through the variations to see what they do. This is the only bowling game we would get on the 2600, as they never made a real sports bowling. Imagine if they did, it probably would have been really cool. Definitely not the strongest title they could have put on here, but I'm not going to complain about a free edition. Here's Double Dunk. Like with bowling, basketball did not see much of a presence on the 2600. We got basketball in 1977, which was a very basic version. There was a plan for real sports basketball, but it was never released. Double Dunk would be the only other basketball game we would get. It was also released really late in the 2600's lifespan, so we do see some more detail in the characters and we even get a title screen. Unlike regular basketball, it's only half the court instead of a full court, which was an interesting decision. The game even keeps track of how many steals, dunks, and rebounds you got, which is super advanced for a 2600 game. It's a decent game, and I'm glad it was added. Now for miniature golf. You play as this large rectangle, and you must get the ball into the blue dot using as few tries as possible. The further away you position the crosshair from the ball, the further the ball will go in the opposite direction. I actually really like this control scheme. Too many golf games try to be too accurate, and I like how minimalistic this one is. The game is packed with 9 levels, which is a lot for a 2600 game, especially one that came out in 1978. The only issue I have is with the graphics. They're way too undetailed, even for Atari. Why do you play as a square? They couldn't make you look more like a person? Anyway, I had a lot of fun with this game, and I'm glad they threw it in. Here's MotoRodeo. This is one of the last games released on the 2600, and you can tell. The game has a really nice menu, which is something the console is not known for. The game also features smooth horizontal scrolling, which is something the 2600 is also not known for. It's a racing game where you gotta make it to the finish line before your opponent does. By hitting down on the joystick, you do a wheelie, which allows you to dodge certain obstacles. Because you can play against a CPU and selected difficulty, the game has a lot of replayability. This is an extremely impressive game, and titles like these were what Atari needed to compete with Nintendo. I'm glad this game made the patch update. Now let's take a look at Aquaventure. This is an unreleased prototype that surfaced in the early 2000s. Unlike most prototypes, this one never got advertised in magazines, so it came as a big surprise when this game was found. Anyway, you play as a scuba diver that must travel through an underwater cave to grab the treasures and then make their way back up to reach the mermaid. You have a limited amount of air, so you can't be underwater too long, and there's enemies you must avoid. I really gotta compliment the scrolling. Most 2600 games just have static screens that don't scroll when you transition from one area to another, so it's impressive they went the extra mile with this. Overall, this is one of the games I really wanted in this collection, and so far, this is my favorite edition. Speaking of unreleased prototypes, here's Save Mary. This would have been another late title, as we can tell with the nice title screen and menu. In this game, Mary is trapped and you must save her by dropping blocks for her to jump on. The water is continuously rising, so you have to act fast. If you drop a block on top of her, you lose a life. When she reaches the top, you can use your crane to bring her up to safety. This game is a huge technical achievement, and I'm not even sure how they pulled this off. The rising water and Tetris-like block placements are especially impressive to me. This is a very well-worthy title to be included. Now let's take a look at Super Football. I noticed that the later games have no gameplay variations. This is understandable because the on-screen menus are much better. Anyway, I'm really impressed with what they came up with. You would never expect a 3D-like perspective on the 2600, but they pulled it off. I actually used to mistake this for real sports football. Doesn't it look like it should be? Anyway, this is another nice addition to the lineup of games. Here's Return to Haunted House. This is another game that came from Flashback 2. When I first heard about this game, I was curious how they would follow up on the original Haunted House. The game had nice vertical scrolling, and it was a really cool game for its time. Imagine how the sequel would look. Unfortunately though, this game is just a ROM hack of adventure. Weird that they would follow up on one game with a ROM hack of another. That doesn't make any sense. Honestly, this and Adventure 2 are not games I'm excited about. Now for Circus Atari. You play as a seesaw and you must guide the 2 circus clowns up to the balloons above. If one of the clowns falls onto the ground, you lose a life. It's considered a breakout clone, and the dynamics are similar when you think about it. There's multiple game variations which change either how your character interacts with the balloons or adds an additional row of barriers under the balloons to change up the gameplay. This is the only paddle game that's part of the 12 new additions. I'm actually surprised this game was not already on here, but better late than never. This is an excellent title, and the analog controls feel great despite using a Pro controller. I'm really glad they put this one on. And finally, here's Maze Craze. This is a very basic game where you must escape out of the room by completing the maze. There's multiple game variations that add CPUs that chase you and slightly alter the maze. Because the mazes are randomly generated, the game basically has unlimited replayability, well, until you get bored, which doesn't take too long. But for 1980 standards, this is a very impressive game. Probably not the most requested addition to the collection, but it doesn't hurt anything to include it. So that's it for the 2600 games, but there's one more game for the Lynx that they added in, Warbirds. It hardly feels like an addition though, because this game was originally on Atari 50 but was removed in the first patch update for some reason. Those who didn't update their console were able to keep this game the entire time, so now it's back. Anyway, you control a biplane and you must destroy the enemies in order to win the war. The game shows off the capabilities of the Lynx with very nice scaling and rotation. I personally find the game very slow and boring, and it doesn't keep my attention for long. Sometimes you see an enemy, but half the time there's nothing going on. I appreciate Atari for re-including this game. I'm not sure why they removed it in the first place, but I wouldn't have cared if they kept this one off. Alright, so just a quick last minute update. Apparently the reason that the game was removed from the first patch was because there was unforeseen copyright issues. So that's all for the new additions. They obviously focused on the 2600 and they did fill in some gaps. In my last video about Atari 50, I complained that the 2600 lineup was missing some of the unreleased prototypes, and now they addressed that. They also focused on some of the later titles, which is nice. Chances are, not a lot of people played the later games because newer consoles like the NES were out, so it's nice that we got some more of them on here so we can see what the 2600 can really do. There's still some gaps that need to be filled though. There's still some 2600 releases they omitted, and they didn't even touch the 7800. But I can't complain about this free holiday update. So, should this sway your opinion on whether you buy Atari 50 or not? The obvious answer is, if any of these new additions are games that you wanted from the start, then yeah. It also might sway your opinion to know that Atari is continuing to support paying customers even after the purchase was already made. It's really courteous of them to add more games for free, and it could mean that more is on the way. I'll say it again, they could have charged us for the extra games and called it DLC, but instead they gave them to us for free as an early holiday present, and it's really commendable. Hey, I just wanted to thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it this far, hit that like button. If you enjoy this type of content, hit the subscribe button for more content. Both of these things really help the channel grow. If you have anything to share, feel free to leave a comment. I read every single comment on this channel, and I'm pretty good at replying back. Anyway, have a good one.